please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
Turning to markets now, as we mentioned, the markets have closed at a record high today to kick off the start of the fourth quarter. The Dow, the S&P, the NASDAQ, the Russell all set fresh highs. And here with me to discuss this, CNBC senior markets commentator Michael Santoli. We have David Katz, who's chief investment strategist at Matrix Asset Advisors. And Sandy Pomeroy is also on set with us. She's equity income fund portfolio manager at Neuberger Berman. Michael, striking today just how strong and broad-based these rallies are.
Yeah, and very much in character. It's a continued grind, about a quarter to a third of a percent. When all else is equal, that's what the market goes up. What's interesting, and it's been going on for weeks, is the way what's coming to the front of the market is the cyclical sectors, the ones that benefit from a stronger economy. For 6 months, the Citigroup Economic Surprise Index was in negative territory. It's just turned positive today. Guess what? All those sectors are coming to the front. So it seems as if that's the dynamic going on in the markets. All the almanac stuff that says when the market's done what it's done this year, the remainder of the year tends to be pretty good. I think has people, kind of the procrastinators, putting money into the market come October.
The exception might have been energy. It turned out to be the worst performing sector today. Oil was down a couple percent. Sandy, what do you guys make of that?
Well, it looks like oil could be making a cyclical low here, and we're sort of interested in that. When we look at the sectors in the market that have performed horribly this year, we have retail, which has been bad, and it's got its own structural issues that we think could be, more persistent. But oil seems to be making more of a cyclical low. Demand is strong. We've seen recent disappointments out of the shales in the U.S., and if we continue to see these disappointments, this could actually bode well for energy prices as we go into 2018. So as we look to position ourselves, we're trying to get a little bit more exposure to the energy area.
And Michael, some have expressed that earlier, saying maybe since this has sat out of a lot of the strength in the market this year, it's the place to go now.
That's one of the things going for it, right? Not just that it has a cyclical benefit, but it's been a laggard. So it's been one of these markets where it just rotates, whatever hasn't participated gets picked up, and that's what's been going on in this very low volatility grind higher.
Sandy, Total is your preferred way to invest here?
Well, we think the European integrated stocks are pretty interesting now, especially for an equity income fund. We run an equity income fund. We're looking for not only good dividends, but dividends that can grow over time. And this one in particular looks like it can benefit from rising energy prices as well. So it looks interesting from that standpoint. Also because the environment for these companies is actually improved from a cost perspective. Oil services costs are down. Even the countries are thinking about lessening terms on some of these future projects, making the future returns for these companies sort of interesting. And so that looks like an opportunity for us.
And that's an opportunity in energy, as I mentioned, one of the worst performing sectors on this strong day. Financials, meantime, were leading the way. They were one of the best performers as we kick off the fourth quarter. The sector still underperforming the S&P on the year. Mr. Katz, you have a few picks that you like in that sector, yes?
We do like the financials. If you go back to the election, the financials have done well, but it's been a rocky road. They started this year off pretty miserably, but the last 3 months have been a lot better. We think you're pretty early on in a good period. So we like the broad group. Our favorites would be Wells Fargo and BBT. We also like JP Morgan, although that's done better than the others that I mentioned.
Michael, where are you thinking about the financials?
Well, I think the financials are benefiting just in the moment in the last couple of weeks from three things. One, bond yields stopped going down. I mean, it really didn't have to go up very much, but they stopped going down. The Fed seems like it's determined to move in December, almost regardless of what the jobs number says this week and all the rest. And then also they've been a laggard group. So that's been that benefit of money rotating into the areas that haven't participated. So I kind of have felt over the course of this year that they were a little bit overloved. People thought that they would just, basically be this magical trade for a while. But I think they're in a phase right now where they can pick up some ground.
David, if this doesn't gain traction for you, what are the alternatives? Where would you go?
Well, we think some of the things that haven't done as well this year are poised to have a better fourth quarter. So you were talking about energy. We do like energy companies here. Occidental, Exxon, very good businesses, paying very nice yields. Consumer staples had a poor third quarter. We think at these levels, you're now starting to get some pretty good dividends, and we'd start to trek back into that area. So General Mills and Kimberly-Clark are both pretty good companies. Pepsi was off today. We think that's good for the next 12 months, although it's not going to shoot the lights out.
And speaking of Pepsi, Sandy, equity income, we have some consumer staples names with dividend yields, but where do you guys stand on those?
You know, that's an area we've been a little bit more concerned about just because you're not seeing the growth, and they are so impacted by all the disruption that we're seeing with Amazon, with Walmart, and is Walmart and Amazon really going head to head with each other? And then you've got the entrance of Lidl and Aldi, and we just think a lot of these businesses could be challenged here in order to, you know, be competitive. They're going to have to lower prices, and that's going to lower profits.
And Michael, perhaps the most notable thing about what we saw today is that you had names like General Motors, the outperformers in the index, while Amazon was weaker. And it doesn't, you put it well earlier, you said it's sort of the smaller value plays that are picking up here in lieu of what's been working so far this year, which is the big platform companies, and perhaps to just kind of plant a flag in that, all the issues surrounding Facebook regulatory right now.
Exactly. So the FANG names and the related big growth stocks have been places where people felt they could hide if the economy wasn't really accelerating, and that's getting unwound a little bit here. I wouldn't go overboard, but yes, now all of a sudden you have to worry about Facebook having margin squeeze because they have to get a little bit less virtual and more hands-on with their business. So I think all that's coming into play. GM is fascinating. The stock's broken out. It's all of a sudden considered to be a play on the future and not the past because of the electric vehicle stuff. So that's been an interesting move to watch. Plus, you're getting a kind of a goose to the replacement cycle, obviously, after the hurricane.
All right, and that's where we stand on a day where, again, the Dow over 22,500 for the first time, the S&P, the NASDAQ over 6,500 for the first time, and the Russell over 1,500 for the first time. Sandy Pomeroy and David Katz, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Appreciate it. Got some news on Tesla here with our Phil LeBeau in Chicago. Phil?
Third quarter deliveries are in, and Tesla delivered 26,150 vehicles, the majority of those being Model S and Model X. What's going to be most interesting is the reaction of the market to the number of Model 3 deliveries in the third quarter, coming in at 220. That's a little bit lighter than some analysts were expecting. Tesla is saying that the Model 3 production was impacted due to what they call production bottleneck. So it was less than anticipated, according to Tesla, the Model 3 production. The company then goes on to say, we understand what needs to be fixed, and we are confident of addressing the manufacturing bottleneck issues in the near term. So again, Tesla delivering a little over 26,000 vehicles in the third quarter, 220 of those being the Model 3. Kelly, back to you.
All right, Phil, thank you. Quickly, Michael, Tesla shares only down 1%.
Yeah, not too. I mean, they are well off their highs, recent highs of 380. So I think people have grown a little bit concerned. Look, it wasn't about this quarter, but still, you have to start ramping up those year-over-year gains in production if you're going to justify where the stock is, especially now that the incumbents are starting to be seen as another play on this area.
Yeah, this is the trade today. General Motors at a recent record, and Tesla shares are down about 1% after hours. And we've got some news on GE. Let's get to Morgan and Brennan with that. Morgan?
Hey, Kelly, that's right. So we've got a leadership change at GE. Effective today, Jeff Immelt is retiring as a director and chairman of the General Electric board. You'll recall that Immelt, who has already stepped aside as CEO, John Flannery took over for him on August 1st, that Immelt was going to remain chairman of GE's board until year's end. Now we've got this press release from the company saying that he is stepping aside and Flannery is going to take over as chairman. That according to this release, this is in light of Immelt's determination that the CEO transition has proceeded smoothly and that Flannery is ready to succeed him as chairman of the board. Also worth noting, Immelt is also retiring as director and chairman of the board at Baker Hughes. That's now a GE company. And Lorenzo Simonelli, who is president and CEO of Baker Hughes, is going to succeed him as chairman of that company. So if you take a look at shares of General Electric, they did close the day up slightly higher. And again, Immelt is stepping down earlier than expected as chairman of GE. Back over to you.
Yeah. Moving a bit higher on that too, Morgan. Thank you. It opens him up to do other things here, Michael, including lead Uber, which he did not ultimately end up doing.
A slightly accelerated handoff of the chairman's job. I mean, GE does not have many CEO transitions. People should keep this in mind. There really haven't been that many. They have very long tenured CEOs.
This is the first one in 17 years.
17 years. Welsh was 20 years or something before that. So I do think that they're careful about it. But yes, given the fact that we now know Immelt has been open to other opportunities, makes sense to hand it off sooner.
All right, and that's the latest there. Now to last night's attack at a concert in Las Vegas. It's the deadliest mass shooting in U.S. history. We've seen a number of attacks on soft targets in recent years. So Eamon Javers has more from Washington on those protection efforts. Eamon?
Yeah, hi, Kelly. That's right. The soft target is the security term for the places where we spend most of our lives, churches, schools, workplaces, and they're so maddeningly difficult for security experts to offer any real solutions for in terms of preventing any attack like this, because you can expand security perimeters as far as you want, but there's always going to be an area just outside of that security perimeter where people are lining up to go through, and that area will always be vulnerable. The FBI did a study of shootings, mass shootings between 2000 and 2013, looking at sort of where they took place, and it's the locations of our daily lives. Take a look at these statistics. Businesses represented 45.6% of the locations of active shooter attacks in that time period. Places of education, 24+%, government, 10%, and open space, 9.4%. That's pretty much everywhere we spend our lives as Americans. It's very difficult to secure everything all of the time. And the advice that security experts give you on what you should do individually if you find yourself in one of these situations is also a little bit frustrating and grim. They say there are three things: run, hide, or fight. The best option you have is to run and put as much speed and distance between you and the source of the gunfire, the source of the danger, as you possibly can. They overwhelmingly advise you to run first. If you can't run, hide. Barricade doors if you're inside a workplace or a school. Turn off your phones. Play dead if the shooter is in the room with you to avoid any attention from that shooter. And then as an absolute last case scenario, Kelly, they do tell you you might have to fight if you're confronted with an active shooter and there's nothing else you can do. Throw heavy objects, get something into that person's face, and very aggressively commit to your action and see if you can get that weapon away from that shooter. But that is an absolute last case. Your best option in any kind of situation like this is to run. But tragically, what we saw in Las Vegas is even running didn't do that much for those people, because this shooter had such a vantage point and such a wide field of fire that people who were running could still be cut down as well. There's almost no place to run to for those people in the very dangerous zone. Kelly? And
not to mention the stampede risks as well. Eamon Still, thank you very much. Eamon Javers, let's talk more about how to protect some of these targets with Larry Barton, who's an instructor in threat management at the FBI Academy and professor of public safety at the University of Central Florida. Also with us is Lou Palumbo. He's director of Elite Intelligence and Protection, which is a private security firm. Guys, thank you both for being here. Larry, what's so chilling about what we saw in Las Vegas is that the three options Eamon described basically wouldn't have helped you. The shooter was so far away. It's one thing if you're in close quarters. You could even make the argument for being armed and able to shoot back and defend yourself, hide and so forth. But what happens when somebody's, you know, what to me looked like a couple of blocks away, 30 stories up? What are people supposed to do to defend themselves?
Well, Kelly, the best thing you can do is just what you just heard, which is to run, because obviously this was an unprecedented attack. To think about the amount of time and effort, you know, even the mentally ill, and to commit this kind of act, you have to, by fact, be a mentally ill individual. The amount of time and preparation to get the weaponry in that room, to have two different rooms, this is all part of the issue that, in terms of a challenge for police officers, but especially, to your good point, for the 43 million people that come to Las Vegas or will go to a movie theater tonight in Miami. Basic safety. One of the fastest things I can tell you is this: if you're ever in one of these situations, act quickly. Survivors. We've interviewed survivors at the Pulse in Orlando, San Bernardino, where you, Bill, and I talked before. The people who survived moved quickly. That's incredibly important.
Lou, one sort of side note, an important side note to moving quickly, though, is the stampede risk. We don't know what happened in Las Vegas, but there have been other high-profile problems of people stampeding out when they're concerned, even sometimes when there's not actually a shooting, there's just the threat of it. So how are you supposed now, would you recommend to people to kind of case where you are? You know, it was suggested earlier that there should be kind of an exit plan that everybody's aware of if you all of a sudden need to exit quickly without causing that kind of panic.
Well, it's very difficult to teach people who are not from the law enforcement community or a military background to become comfortable with this concept called situational awareness. I don't think I want to put the responsibility of safety and survival of events of this type on the backs of our population. I think it falls to the private security sector and, most importantly, to the law enforcement community. They have to come in and start to make better plans and implement procedures that will further enhance the safety of these environments, and it can be done.
Larry, a hotel or casino is, in a way, kind of uniquely vulnerable in the sense that people freely come and go all the time, whether they're guests or not. You don't check necessarily in advance, maybe unless they're going to an elevator. Are there ways in terms of surveillance, in terms of techniques for trying to have more of a technological awareness of what's going on and be oriented in the direction of looking for potential threats inside?
Oh, great question. Here's the reality of hotels, and I've worked in the hotels in Las Vegas for 30 years. The priority of their security for the 125,000 rooms in that city is first the vault, secondly is the information security, and third is the cage. It's about the robbery. That's how their security, that's the architecture, that's the chassis. They do care about the guest, and that's obviously the thousands of cameras, but they're there primarily to watch to make sure that there's no robbery at the property. You are your own director of security. That's why it's important that we mention this. So in terms of the hotels, what we really have to do, and you just heard this very nicely said, we have to redirect our resources so that we get the properties to be part of the solution, that they rehearse these situations. They're more than ready for a robbery. Steve Wynn's daughter was kidnapped several years ago. That property managed that with great discretion. The media was supportive. They know how to manage a robbery. It's this kind of opportunistic crime that anywhere, a stadium, a theater, we don't in society have the public-private partnership. I was shocked to hear the MGM admit that they need trauma counselors. Really? You're running one of the greatest, largest hotel chains in the world. You should have had those trauma counselors, gone to the ministries, gone to the mosques, gone to the synagogues. You should have known your own EAP program. This is when we look to an employer to be at its best. That's very good. That's an employee assistance program. MGM has that for every employee, but guess what? Every employer in Las Vegas also has an EAP. That's where trauma counselors could have come in from Los Angeles overnight. So I'm just shocked to hear that a great company did not think about some of the basic resources they have. Can I just mention one more thing quickly, because I just got this 10 minutes ago, and you'll be the first network to know this. The good people of Uber just called me to tell me that they picked up this perpetrator and his girlfriend on September 9th and September 20th, and guess where they took them? To the Mandalay Bay. This is a good example where overnight, this fell out of fortune. So I just suggested to Uber, you need to call the FBI and give them that information. We need to be better at data collection. We really need to be better at data collection and behavioral. You know, how are people behaving when they go into a hotel, check into a room? What was the story with room service? Did he have a do not disturb sign in the 2 rooms that he was renting? There's a lot of this. It's Monday morning quarterback, but guess what? We've been talking about this for 30 years. Let's ramp it up and keep people safe.
And Lou, you know, because you also mentioned that you think the responsibility here falls to the private sector and law enforcement. What kind of responsibility do you mean by that? Is there something unique about this instance that makes that a particular challenge, or should there have been obvious points at which more scrutiny could have prevented this from happening?
I think what we need to do is be a bit more proactive and start to come to terms with a new norm. We no longer have the luxury of having hotels, shopping malls, movie theaters, churches, and academic environments security free. You need to have armed assets in place to address any type of threat, number one. Number two, and just to mention this, I ran the security for the Golden Globes for 14 years, proudly without incident. After 9/11, we implemented a completely different approach and plan with the support of the Beverly Hills Police, the Los Angeles County Sheriffs, and the FBI. During the event, and if anyone's familiar with the Beverly Hilton property, it's a large horseshoe that was used with a big red carpet to introduce all of our celebrities and their publicists and 3,000 press people. And basically what we did was we prevented anyone from renting a room that overlooked the red carpet, and in addition to that, we had snipers in place. When you hold the high ground, you control the environment below. We need to be more proactive as a law enforcement community and in the private sector. Not to contradict this gentleman, but I think it's a tremendous responsibility to ask someone to come in and start to profile guests coming into cities like Las Vegas with the volumes of people. They are not clinically backgrounded nor experienced, and they're just trying to get through the day themselves. We need to be more proactive, spend a little money, because we're on a whole different footing here. The thing I also want to say to you about this event isn't an anomaly. The reason it's caught our attention is because of the body count. We're at the point in this society where we have these incidents, and when there's 2 or 3 people murdered, we gloss over them, kind of like what transplayed in Marseille and in Europe, and Canada. Because of the body count, this caught our attention. There are ways to protect these environments. Each environment stands on its own merit. Each event in these environments stands on their own merit. You need to go in
just 10 seconds on your good point, though, about security. And I think it's important, Kelly, and the bill.
Last one we have to go, Larry. Yep.
Sure. real quickly would be this. Let's remember, we're not asking people to be behavioral scientists, but putting a gun in every teacher's hands or to have surveillance cameras in every part of the workplace is not tenable. We need to come together with a public-private partnership.
I don't think that's what we're suggesting, Larry. I'm not talking about giving teachers guns. I'm talking about going into the private sector with companies that have prior or current law enforcement agents who have been properly trained, not teachers and not private security people without law enforcement background. We've turned a corner in this culture. We need to wake up and address our new norm. This isn't the wake-up call. We've had the wake-up call. We've just been ignoring it. These hotels, movie theaters, that's exactly correct. Movie theaters, shopping malls need to invest in armed security, properly trained and equipped to assess situations spontaneously and neutralize threats spontaneously.
Okay, gentlemen,
we've had shootings inside the CIA and the Pentagon. We can have them anywhere. Thank you.
Larry Barton, Lou Palumbo, that's also a very good point. Appreciate you being with us. Let's get the latest details on the deadly shootings in Las Vegas with Sue Herrera. Sue?
Kelly, thank you very much. Here's what's happening at this hour out in Las Vegas. The death toll now stands at 58 after a gunman opened fire at a music festival on the Las Vegas Strip last night. 515 people have now been hospitalized. It is the deadliest shooting in U.S. history. There were 22,000 people attending that concert. Las Vegas authorities appealing to residents to give blood, saying there is an urgent need to treat some of the hundreds who were injured. People have responded, more than 1,000 people lining up at one of the 2 locations in the city. In Washington, former Representative Gabby Giffords, who was grievously wounded in 2011 by a gunman, joined her husband outside the Capitol this afternoon. She raised her fist, saying the nation is counting on you. The 2 say Congress must pass legislation to keep deadly weapons out of the wrong hands. Meantime, the suspect, 64-year-old Stephen Paddock, killed himself at the Mandalay Bay Hotel before police arrived. Authorities found at least 10 guns in his hotel room, including assault weapons. His father was a notorious bank robber who tried to run down an FBI agent with his car in Las Vegas back in 1960. He was on the agency's most wanted list after escaping from federal prison in Texas in 1968. A still developing story, Kelly. We'll keep you posted as events warrant. I'll send it back to you.
Sue, I was just going to say the New York Times is reporting that he had 19 rifles in his hotel room, 2 on tripods, and hundreds of rounds of ammunition. Right. That's according to an official.
There's a lot of kind of wiggle room in some of the numbers. It depends on, from what NBC's Pete Williams has been reporting, it depends on whether you're talking about the assault weapons, whether you're talking about rifles. So it's kind of still in flux, but needless to say, he had an enormous cache of weapons. And the questions out there are now, how did he get them into the hotel? But keep in mind, the gun show is coming to Las Vegas in just a couple of days, so there are people who are bringing those sorts of weapons in and out. So hopefully we'll get it cleared up sometime soon, but it's still really a developing situation out there.
All right, Sue, thank you.
You got it, Kelly.
Sue Herrera. How could this impact Las Vegas tourism? Joining us is Rick Harrison. He's owner of Gold and Silver Pawn. It's a leading tourist attraction in Las Vegas, Rick, and we're just glad to have you with us as a local. I mean, what's it been like for you today?
I went to bed early last night and I left my phone in the kitchen. So when I woke up this morning, I had over 100 text messages, and it's been a pretty crazy day. I just found out that my 14-year-old son, 2 kids from his school, just got, were shot. So. I mean, this was hundreds. I mean, it's just not the people who were killed. All the people. It's affecting the entire community.
Of course. I mean, I wonder, what are they doing at the schools? Are they having classes? What are they doing?
My son's he goes to a private school. They're all in class today, and it's a religious school, so they're talking about it at school. You know, I think it's. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I'm just saying it's something you really, really need to talk about. I mean, it's if you lock yourself in your house and you don't want to go out no more, they've won. And you just, I mean, people have to face the fact there's evil in this world, and this was it. And I don't know if this could have been avoided or not, but I think the best thing we can do is when we see someone acting really, really bizarre, he needs to call the authorities.
I know, you wonder, because they're now the New York Times saying this guy had 19 rifles in his hotel room. they say that there were hotel staff in and out. We'll see if anybody noticed anything, and if anybody didn't speak up, I'm sure they're thinking about that now. I was just going to say to your point about going to concerts and business as usual, it sounds like Cirque du Soleil and a few things have canceled shows tonight. You think that's, I understand the concern, but do you think that's the wrong thing to do?
I think it's business to business what they're going to do. I mean, your last guest was just saying basically arm everybody on the planet. I don't think that's the solution. I don't think we have to carry on, and it's something we have to deal with in life. I hope this doesn't happen again. I mean, just everyone's got to keep an eye out. If you see someone acting weird, you just got to call the police right away. I mean, it's not one of those things, well, I don't want to call the cops on them. What if you didn't do anything? Just call them anyway.
Yeah, and Rick, it's hard to necessarily handicap exactly how this might affect, if at all, the willingness of people to visit Las Vegas, gather in crowds, go on vacation, a place a lot of other people are. We're sitting here a few blocks away from the site of 9/11 attacks at the World Trade Center, and flocks of people come. And in the immediate aftermath, people say, wow, nobody's going to go near these tall skyscrapers anymore. So what would you expect Vegas built on, to a large degree, people coming from elsewhere to play? What would you expect the impact might be?
I mean, I think the impact, they won't have open concerts with the right in front of the casinos anymore. I mean, we have a lot of other venues that they could be at. It's sad, but I don't think that'll happen for a long, long time. And, the police, Joe Lombardo's done an amazing job. Instead of talking politics and everybody that a lot of people are talking, we just need to get everybody. Let's everybody just come together and pray a little bit and get over this in a few days, and then let's try and come up with a solution after that. I mean, everyone's talking about there was a news report for 20 guns, 30 guns, 10 guns. All that really doesn't matter right now. And if you know somebody was affected, if your kids are upset about this, talk to your kids. Tell them that's what needs to be done right now. Not a lot of talking, a lot of healing, and then we'll figure out how we can fix it in a few days. But let's get over this first.
Yeah, Rick, thanks for joining us. It's really good to hear from you.
Thanks for having me.
That's Rick Harrison of the Gold and Silver Pawn Shop. And by the way, if you want to give financially, the Las Vegas Victims Fund set up on GoFundMe by Steve Sisolak, the county commission chair, has now raised over $1 million of their $2 million goal. Started off the fourth quarter with a big rally on Wall Street today that set records across all four major indexes. The Dow up 150 points. It closed above 22,500 for the first time. The NASDAQ closed above 6,500 for the first time with a 20-point gain. The Russell closed above 1,500 for the first time with an 18-point gain. And the S&P added 9 to 2529, and that was also an all-time high. We have a news alert on Equifax now. Morgan Brennan has those details. Morgan?
Hey, Kelly, I sure do. So Equifax announcing that cybersecurity firm Mandiant has concluded forensic investigation of the incident that is affecting the credit reporting agency, that potentially an additional 2.5 million U.S. consumers have been impacted by this security breach that happened back during the summer. That brings the total number of U.S. consumers that have been potentially impacted, sensitive data being stolen by hackers, up to 145.5 million people. So according to this release from Equifax, the newly appointed interim CEO, Paulino Barros Jr., saying that he wanted these results to be promptly released and that, quote, our priorities are transparency and improving support for consumers, that he will continue to monitor progress on a daily basis. But of course, this latest disclosure coming just ahead of what is going to be 3 days of testimony by Equifax's former CEO, Richard Smith, on the Hill with lawmakers throughout the rest of this week. So again, Equifax saying that their forensic investigation has been concluded and an additional 2.5 million consumers potentially impacted. Back over to you.
Morgan, thank you. We'll speak more about this in a moment with Sheila Bair, the former FDIC chair, get her thoughts on what's been happening there ahead of that testimony. Take a look at Nordstrom now, one of the worst performers in the S&P 500 today, encountering some challenges to go private, and Toys R Us may be to blame. The share's down 6% today. The New York Post reporting the high-end retailer has been unable to secure financing for a deal because the Toys R Us bankruptcy has been causing, quote, anxiety in the marketplace. As I mentioned, Nordstrom stock down more than 6% today. Last month, CNBC reported that private equity firm Leonard Green would provide Nordstrom family members with $1 billion in funding to take the store chain private. Michael.
Yeah, I don't know if it took the Toys R Us bankruptcy declaration to inject anxiety into this area. I mean, Toys R Us was an LBO over a decade ago. It's known to be kind of a zombie in terms of the capital structure. But the potential for taking Nordstrom private has been a test for the appetite for retail deals for a while.
And I'm a little surprised, as hot as the credit markets are, they're still not maybe.
There are areas that they don't really
want
to touch.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Up next, we're going to have more.